The Sally House in Atchison, Kansas, is one of America's most chilling haunted houses, and its story is steeped in legend, terror, and paranormal activity. It all started in the early 20th century when the house was occupied by Dr. Charles Finney, a physician who used the first floor as his office while he and his family lived upstairs. The house seemed ordinary, but it would soon be marked by a tragedy that many say left a lingering and restless spirit. According to local lore, a little girl named Sally was brought to Dr. Finney's office one day with severe abdominal pain. The girl's mother believed she was suffering from a bad stomach ache, but Dr. Finney quickly realized it was something more severe: appendicitis. Fearing the appendix might rupture and cause fatal complications, he decided to operate immediately. In his urgency, he began the operation before the anesthesia fully took effect. Sally woke up screaming in pain as the doctor cut into her, only to slip back into unconsciousness moments later. Tragically, she died on the operating table, her last sensations being fear and agony. After her death, rumors started to spread that Sally's spirit remained in the house, but it wasn't until years later, when the Pickman family moved in, that the house's haunted reputation was truly cemented. In the early 1990s, Tony and Deborah Pickman bought the house, hoping it would be a cozy, welcoming home. They were excited to start a new chapter of their lives there, but soon after moving in, strange occurrences shattered their hopes. At first, it was subtle: a cold draft in certain areas of the house, flickering lights, or objects that seemed to be misplaced. But things quickly escalated. One day, Deborah noticed the family's dog acting strangely. The dog would bark furiously at empty spaces, often fixating on the nursery, even though there was nothing visible there. Soon after, Deborah began finding toys that had moved on their own, sometimes stacking themselves in odd configurations, as if someone unseen was playing with them. The couple dismissed it as imagination, even though they both felt increasingly uneasy. Then, Tony began experiencing disturbing incidents personally. He would wake up with scratches on his body, often deep and fresh, as if a child had clawed at him during the night. The scratches would sometimes bleed, despite him having no recollection of anything that could have caused them. They appeared in clusters on his back, arms, and even his face. Tony, a skeptic at first, tried to brush it off as a medical condition or his own doing in his sleep. But as these attacks continued, the pattern became undeniable, and the scratches started to feel like a personal assault. One evening, Tony saw something that made his blood run cold. He was walking down the hallway when he saw a little girl standing in the nursery doorway, just staring at him with an intense, sad expression. She appeared to be around 6 or 7 years old, with dark hair and a simple dress that looked old-fashioned. Tony blinked, thinking it was a trick of the light, but she didn't disappear. She continued to stare, and then, in the blink of an eye, she vanished into thin air. Tony told Deborah, who confessed that she too had seen glimpses of what she thought was a child in the house, but she had been too afraid to mention it. Fear and tension mounted as the paranormal activity intensified. One night, Deborah was woken up by the sound of footsteps in the hallway, soft but deliberate, as if someone was pacing back and forth. She lay there, frozen, and then heard a whisper, faint but distinct, calling out, "Mommy?" Deborah was shaken to the core, realizing that whatever was haunting the house had somehow attached itself to them, and it was growing more active and aggressive by the day. They sought help from paranormal investigators, hoping for answers or a way to make peace with the spirit. A team arrived and set up their equipment, including voice recorders and EMF, electromagnetic field detectors, hoping to document the strange events. During the investigation, one of the psychics claimed to have contacted the spirit of Sally, the little girl who had died so tragically in the house. According to the psychic, Sally was angry and confused, lashing out because of the trauma of her death. She wanted people to feel the pain and fear she had endured. As if to confirm the psychic's words, objects began flying across the room during the investigation, and one of the team members reported feeling as though they'd been slapped by an invisible hand. Scratches appeared on Tony's body again, in full view of the investigators. At one point, the investigators captured an EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, of a young girl's voice, barely a whisper but undeniably saying, "Leave." Over the next few months, the activity in the house became so violent that the Pickmans feared for their lives. Fires started spontaneously, objects would crash to the floor with no one around, and doors would slam shut as if someone was furious. Tony became physically sick, plagued by anxiety and constant fatigue. He also began having terrible nightmares in which a child's face would appear, accusing him with hollow eyes. Unable to endure anymore, the Pickmans finally moved out, leaving the house behind. They felt relief at escaping, but their lives were forever changed by the experience. To this day, the Sally House is considered one of the most haunted locations in the U.S. Paranormal investigators continue to explore its dark corners, hoping to make contact with the spirit of Sally or understand what might still be lurking there. Some claim to have seen the shadow of a little girl, others hear whispers and footsteps, and almost everyone who enters the house leaves with a sense of deep, unsettling fear. The Sally House remains empty now, a monument to a tragedy that may never find peace, and a constant reminder of the stories left behind by those who dared to live within its walls. The Amityville Horror House on Long Island, New York, is perhaps one of the most notorious haunted homes in the world. The chilling events that transpired there became the subject of books, movies, and endless debate. Its terrifying history began with a brutal crime, one that many believe left the house haunted with a dark and sinister energy. In November 1974, the DeFeo family, Ronald and Louise DeFeo and their 5 children, lived in the large Dutch colonial-style house on 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, a quiet suburban neighborhood. But the peace of this idyllic setting was shattered when 23-year-old Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr., the eldest son, took a rifle and murdered his parents and 4 siblings while they slept. One by one, Ronald went room to room, firing the rifle and leaving no one alive. Later, when questioned by police, Ronald claimed he had heard voices telling him to kill his family, although he later gave contradictory statements. He was eventually convicted of the murders and sentenced to life in prison, but the question lingered: what had driven him to commit such a horrific act? A year after the murders, in December 1975, George and Kathy Lutz moved into the house with their 3 children. The Lutzes knew about the DeFeo murders, but were drawn to the house's affordable price and attractive design. They believed they could make a fresh start there, even though its dark history loomed over them. Little did they know, the horror awaiting them was beyond anything they could have imagined. Almost immediately after moving in, the Lutz family began to experience strange and unsettling events. George, the father, started waking up every night at exactly 3:15 a.m., the approximate time that Ronald DeFeo Jr. had committed the murders. It felt like an unseen force was compelling him to wake, and he'd lie in bed, feeling a sense of dread he couldn't shake. Soon, he began having strange mood swings and bouts of aggression. Friends who visited noticed he appeared uncharacteristically withdrawn and haunted, as if something was affecting him deeply. Around the same time, green slime began to ooze from the walls and keyholes of the house. At first, they thought it was mold or some other natural phenomenon, but as it spread and thickened, they realized it was something much stranger and far more terrifying. Despite cleaning it off repeatedly, slime would reappear, as if the house itself was decaying from within. Then, doors would slam shut violently, even when no one was near them, and windows would fly open with a force that couldn't be explained by drafts. One of the most terrifying incidents occurred when the family found mysterious cloven hoof prints in the snow outside their home. These prints didn't belong to any animal they could identify, and seemed to suggest that something not of this world was circling their property, watching and waiting. The family also reported hearing disembodied voices and unsettling whispers, sometimes calling out their names. At times, the children would hear their parents' voices calling them, only to realize that neither George nor Kathy had spoken. The most disturbing experience, however, was the apparition that Kathy claimed to see. One night, she saw the face of an old woman in the mirror, shriveled and hollow-eyed, staring back at her. It wasn't her own reflection, but something or someone else's, It terrified her so much that she screamed, waking George, who also claimed to feel a strange presence in the room. The sightings didn't end there. At times, Kathy would see a shadowy figure lurking around the house, its shape shifting in the corner of her vision, vanishing as soon as she turned to face it. In an attempt to rid the house of this malevolent presence, the Lutzes invited a priest to bless their home. But as the priest entered the room that had once belonged to the DeFeo children, he reportedly felt an overwhelming sense of dread. He claimed to hear a deep, growling voice ordering him to get out. Startled, he obeyed, warning the Lutz family that he felt a powerful evil in the house, though he couldn't say what it was. George's condition worsened as well. He became obsessed with the house, spending hours in front of the fireplace, despite a biting cold that permeated the home. No matter how much he stoked the fire, he couldn't get warm, as if a chilling force was draining the warmth out of him. His obsession grew to the point where he began neglecting his work and withdrawing from his family, seemingly under the house's dark influence. In their 28th night in the house, everything culminated into a final, horrifying experience. George and Kathy were jolted awake by a series of loud noises, banging, voices, and screams. Doors slammed, furniture shook, and a suffocating sense of terror filled the air. It was as though the house itself had come alive, unleashing its full wrath. That night, the family fled, leaving everything behind. They never returned. After the Lutzes left, the story of their 28 days of terror in the Amityville house spread quickly, sparking widespread media attention. The house's reputation grew, as did skepticism from those who wondered if the events were exaggerated or fabricated for publicity. However, the Lutz family remained adamant about their experiences, insisting that something in that house had terrorized them. Paranormal investigators, mediums, and even skeptics flocked to the property over the years, but the mystery has never been fully solved. To this day, debate rages over whether the house was genuinely haunted or whether the Lutz's story was an elaborate hoax. Some argue that the psychological trauma of moving into a house where such a gruesome murder occurred could explain their experiences. Others believe that the house itself holds a dark energy, one that had first affected Ronald DeFeo Jr., driving him to murder and then tormented the Lutz family, nearly breaking them. Today, the house still stands, albeit with a changed address to ward off unwanted attention. It has passed through multiple owners since the Lutz family's infamous ordeal, and while none have reported anything as intense, the legend of the Amityville Horror House remains a haunting reminder of those 28 days of terror that drove a family to flee in the dead of night. The Winchester Mystery House in San Jose, California, stands as one of America's strangest and most mysterious architectural marvels, shrouded in legend, tragedy, and perhaps even the restless spirits of those who perished by the Winchester rifle. The sprawling mansion, filled with mind-bending and bizarre features, was the life's work of Sarah Winchester, widow of William Wirt Winchester, heir to the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. In 1881, Sarah's life took a tragic turn. Her husband, William, passed away from tuberculosis, leaving her a vast fortune and a nearly 50% stake in the Winchester Company. But Sarah, devastated by the loss, became increasingly troubled by a strange and unshakable belief that she was cursed. After the death of her infant daughter years earlier, Sarah became convinced that the spirits of those killed by Winchester rifles, men, women, children, were haunting her family, punishing them for the countless lives lost to her husband's invention. Her grief turned to guilt, and she sought spiritual guidance from a Boston medium who only deepened her fears. The medium told her that the spirits of those killed by the gun that won the West were angry, and their wrath would continue unless she took drastic action. She was advised to appease these restless souls by moving west and building a house to serve as a sanctuary for them. But there was one strange condition. Sarah was told that she must never stop building. As long as construction continued, the spirits would be at peace, and Sarah's life would be spared. Compelled by this advice and the guilt she carried, Sarah moved to San Jose, where she purchased a modest farmhouse, and so began a 38-year construction project that would result in the Winchester Mystery House. With the money she inherited, Sarah was able to employ a crew of carpenters who worked in rotating shifts 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Under her constant supervision and changing directions, the house grew into a labyrinth of twisted hallways, nonsensical staircases, and peculiar rooms. Sarah's unique vision and fear drove her to design the house with numerous oddities: staircases that led directly into ceilings, windows installed in floors, doors that opened to sheer drops, and hallways that looped back on themselves. It was said that she believed these confusing designs would help trap the spirits, or at the very least, confuse them and keep them from following her. One of the house's most infamous features is the door to nowhere, which opens onto an exterior wall with a steep drop to the ground below. Another staircase, known as the switchback staircase, has 7 flights of stairs with 44 steps total, but only rises 9 feet. Sarah designed each of these oddities herself, consulting blueprints and constantly altering the plans based on messages she believed she received from the spirits during seances held in a special seance room. This room had a single entrance but 3 exits, and Sarah would lock herself in nightly, supposedly to communicate with the spirits and receive instructions for the next day's construction. As the house expanded into what would eventually become a 160-room mansion, Sarah's paranoia grew. She would reportedly sleep in a different room each night, believing it would confuse any spirits who might attempt to follow her. She had 13 bathrooms installed, but only 1 working toilet, which she claimed would mislead spirits who might seek to trap her in one of the rooms. The number 13 appears frequently in the mansion's design, a symbolic gesture many believe intended to ward off the dead. There are chandeliers with 13 candles, windows with 13 panes, and even staircases with 13 steps. By the early 1900s, the mansion had grown to 4 stories and sprawled across 24,000 square feet, with nearly 10,000 windows and 2,000 doors. Visitors, guests, and laborers who worked there claimed to see shadowy figures moving through the hallways, hearing faint whispers, or feeling sudden chills as they passed through certain rooms. Some workers claimed to encounter what they believed were the spirits of those killed by Winchester rifles, and many refused to work there at night. A rumor spread that Sarah herself had been cursed with eternal unrest and that she would roam the mansion after her death. On September 5, 1922, Sarah passed away in her sleep at the age of 83, leaving behind the sprawling, labyrinthine mansion. Construction on the house stopped immediately, and the estate was sold, as there was no clear plan for its future. When her belongings were removed, movers reported hearing strange noises echoing through the empty rooms, as if the spirits were still there. It is said that Sarah's ghost never left, and that she continues to roam the halls, overseeing her eternal project. The Winchester Mystery House is now a public museum, open to the curious and the brave who want to explore its mysteries. Visitors have reported seeing shadowy figures, sometimes believed to be Sarah herself, wandering the halls, or appearing momentarily in the corner of a room before vanishing. Others report hearing voices calling their names, feeling sudden, unexplainable cold spots, and seeing doors open and close by themselves. One particular area, known as the Hall of Fires, is thought to be especially haunted. Named for its numerous fireplaces, the room was one of Sarah's favorite spots and was used to keep her warm during the cold winter months. Guests and employees alike have reported feeling an intense heat in this room, even on cool days, followed by a bone-chilling cold. Shadowy figures are often seen lurking there, and some people report feeling an intense sensation of being watched. Another area, the seance room, still holds a sense of Sarah's spiritual practices. Many believe that she is still reaching out to the spirits in this room, as guests have reported faint whispers and cold gusts, even though the room is sealed off from any drafts. On some nights, people claim to hear the sound of light footsteps moving away, as though Sarah is continuing her nightly ritual of consulting the spirits. Employees who close the house at night have also shared eerie experiences, saying they feel an unseen presence following them or hear doors creaking when no one else is around. Some claim to have seen ghostly figures dressed in period clothing, wandering the corridors as if still carrying out construction duties assigned by Sarah. These sightings have led many to believe that Sarah's construction workers, as loyal in death as they were in life, never truly left the house and continue their endless labor. The Winchester Mystery House is not just a haunted mansion. It's a physical embodiment of Sarah Winchester's grief, guilt, and fear. Today, it stands as a monument to the lengths one woman went to in her desperate attempt to make amends for a legacy built on the tools of war. Whether cursed by spirits or by her own haunted mind, Sarah's creation remains a labyrinth of unanswered questions and eerie echoes of the past, drawing visitors who seek to uncover the secrets of a house built for the dead.